Welcome back everybody once again to today's video of DIY investing. Today I wanted to go over a couple key points that I feel aren't talked about with this upcoming cycle. Something to note is the fact that I believe this cycle varies very differently from anything else that we've experienced up to this point. For the first time ever, we now have major institutional investors entering this market and have been since 2018. What is this going to do to the price of Bitcoin? Are we about to have an even more parabolic rise than we've ever seen up to this point? Comparing last cycle to this cycle, if the same cycle happens that we saw from 16 to 18, that would send Bitcoin over $300,000. Is this possible? Could we go even higher than that potentially? I'm going to be covering all of that in today's video, so stay tuned for more. If you guys like my videos, do myself a favor by leaving a like, comment, and subscribing to this channel for more updates in the future. If you like my analysis and want to see more of it, click the invitation link in the description of this video, and there you're going to get access to my Discord server. I appreciate the support so much. You guys truly are awesome, and I'm so thankful to be a part of this amazing community. There are truly great times headed for crypto, and I'm super excited for everybody that's a part of this journey with me. With all that being said, let's jump right in the video today. Today I just wanted to go through and kind of talk about a discussion and just bring up a couple points with Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency market as a whole. Bitcoin's obviously broken out once again and we're going for higher highs. We're at that 7,800. I was expecting us to hit about 84 to 8,500 in this next cycle up. We're going to kind of watch and see exactly where we're going to hit resistance. But with this move, guys, that we're seeing here, this has a lot of people completely dumbfounded. I mean, most everybody didn't expect us to break out of this major resistance at about 6K to 6,500. And in fact, we've basically blown out of that with no hesitation. A lot of people were calling for a top right here with this retrace. And in fact, we just really have just started going back up once again. So a lot of people are left questioning. A lot of people were calling for lower lows, and then we've actually blown them out of the water by going up significantly higher than anyone expected. And so with this, I just wanted to kind of go back, analyze some past patterns with Bitcoin, kind of talk about what's going on right now with the cryptocurrency market, and just kind of gives my thoughts with things moving forward. One of the things that I wanted to note is the fact that this cycle is just significantly more different than the last cycle. And now I know a lot of people are comparing this cycle to the last one that we had, but really I just don't find the comparisons as probable or likely, just because of the fact the consolidation was different. Even though we bottomed at relatively the same price and capitulated, the consolidation as far as accumulation was a lot longer. As far as Bitcoin's last cycle, we just trended sideways for a long time. And on top of that, the impulses up weren't as severe. Now, there's a couple reasons I think that this is I think there's a couple reasons for this. One being the fact that there wasn't a whole lot of liquidity back here in Bitcoin. On top of that, you had so much FUD back in the day because the Mt. Gox hack occurred up here at the peak values. So it's hard to say exactly what would have happened had Mt. Gox not got hacked, with all of the FUD that came out surrounding Bitcoin in this times. And really, I think that that's what caused this long, slow, drawn-out bear market that we saw. Now, even though our current bear market that we had is longer in comparison to this one, this is also a time where there's significantly more value inside of Bitcoin than there ever has been, and by a significant margin at that. Now, one thing I've noticed with the last cycle, and even if you go date back to the very first cycles that we had, let's go all the way back. I'm just going to include the one back here because this is one that's more important as far as this is actually when the halving started to get incorporated into price. Now we have these big blow off tops after major rallies, and then we have these little stairs up, these little leg ups that happen before the halving, and after the halving is when prices go super parabolic. And this is kind of what we've seen up to this point. The last halving was back here in 2016 at about $700 in that range. But you see the same pattern. You have this little leg up, another leg up, and then once the halving starts is when prices go major parabolic. And that's kind of the pattern that's repeated. But this cycle varies significantly from the last ones in the way that what we're seeing now is a significant impulse up that's erasing a vast majority of this bear market that we saw in just one little move. Now keep in mind, guys, wherever this cycle tops out is only going to be the one wave based off of Elliott wave theory. Now for you guys that understand Elliott wave theory just states that markets behave in 3 sets of waves through human emotion. Now we're finishing the 3 wave right now, so we haven't even finished the 5. So this impulse is already significantly greater than anything that we've seen. I mean, based off of previous impulses, if we pull up from the low of the move to the high that we're currently sitting at, we're at about 148% move. Now, in comparison to previous highs, that's about right on par, but I still see us going significantly higher in this cycle. So we're just going to have to kind of watch and see, because I mean, if we go from the very bottom of the fake out that we saw back in 2015 to the high here, that was 150%. So this move, this one wave that we saw back in the day in 2015, is about the same as far as percent return that we're seeing now. The only difference is the fact that this was going from $200 to about $500. And so this was a time where the percent return on Bitcoin was already significantly greater for smaller moves. We're now seeing about the same return on investment in a valued Bitcoin that goes from 3,200 all the way up to about 8,000 is what we've peaked at, just under 8,000 at 7,800. So the moves are becoming more parabolic even in a more expensive price. So with that being said, is this a pattern that we're going to continue to see? Are the moves in this next cycle going to be more parabolic than anything we've seen up to this point in Bitcoin? Is there really more demand? There's there more value inside of this market than there ever has been? I think so, personally. I mean, you got to keep in mind, guys, when we had the futures trading that launched at the top, right? That gave big money the first chance to really start shorting the market. Because keep in mind, guys, we were just under $1 trillion in market cap at the peak of 20,000. So once these futures exchanges opened, and we had trading with Bitcoin on the futures market, this allowed big players the first opportunity to start shorting Bitcoin. So what did they do? They loaded on the short positions and they knocked prices down. Now, while everybody was fearful and they were panic selling, who was the ones buying up that fear? The major institutions, banks, corporations, the rich in general. Those are the people that were buying up all of this fear throughout the entire bear market. So while everybody was scared, the rich got richer, the poor got poorer, and they stole everybody's Bitcoins. And now what are they doing? Obviously, they're going to pump their prices as much as they can because they want to make the biggest investment possible, the biggest return on investment possible for themselves. And this is kind of the way that it's always worked in history. Obviously, they look to accumulate more wealth, and the only way to do that is to take it from the people that have it. And so up to this point, Bitcoin really didn't have enough liquidity to even really do anything. I mean, for these big players to get into the market, there wasn't enough liquidity back here. I think that there was about 14 billion in market cap in this one wave, and so really, they couldn't take on these massive buying positions that they wanted to, just because of the fact it would pump prices up way too high, and they would basically just miss out on their chance to buy it. And so, what did they do? They shorted the top. That is the most effective way to accumulate everybody's Bitcoin. While they were shorting, everybody else was selling, and they profited all the way down. And so this is kind of what we saw. And is it coincidence that basically at the bottom is when they closed off their contracts? I don't think so. I mean, you got to think of it from a perspective of a market maker. Obviously, when they close off their shorts, they're going to be looking to accumulate once again and pump the prices, which is exactly what we're seeing. They accumulated this entire bear market, they closed their shorts, and then they went long. And so, guys, this is a really crazy time for crypto because I think that we're about to see and witness the most parabolic markets that we've ever seen up to this point. You got to think about it from this perspective, guys. How many Bitcoins are just completely lost out of this circulating supply? How many people forgot their private keys back in the early days when Bitcoins were practically worthless? How many people sent them to missing addresses that didn't exist at all? These are all factors that have yet to be. Incorporated into the current price valuation. Now, what happens when major institutions, maybe mainstream news, starts to pick up on this, and then the average retail investor starts to realize, hey, this is actually significantly more scarce than we had ever even expected before? What's that going to do to the price of Bitcoin? Obviously, it's going to take it significantly higher than we could have ever expected. So with an already scarce supply of about 17.5 million now and total 21 million in the circulating supply, we don't know how many of those are just lost forever. So I think that this is all going to be factored into the next cycle, because the next cycle is one where the average retail investor, the average consumer, is going to wake up to Bitcoin. This is where you're going to see mainstream news really start to hype up Bitcoin's price, and this is going to create a very parabolic cycle. So with all that being said, this is something I just really wanted to talk about today, is the fact that there's so many factors that go into pumping Bitcoin's price. How high are we actually going to go? This is really just a speculation video. Obviously, this is a speculative market, and so nobody really knows how high we're going to go. A lot of people have been calling for 6K as the top, and we continue to go higher, which tells me that this cycle is going to be vastly different than anything we've seen up to this point. Now, with all of that being said, guys, this brings me back to Elliott wave theory. Wherever we top out, let's say that we hit 10K. This is the one wave, and I would expect us to retrace back down to about 6,500. I don't find it likely that we're going to break this 6,500 barrier and come down and retest some of these lower lows, not with how parabolic Bitcoin is already. Now, what comes next is the 3-wave. Now, based off of the previous cycles, remember guys, what we saw are these little leg ups. Are we going to see something similar, or is Bitcoin going to basically lead into price discovery before we have the halving? Because what happened previously in the cycles, and my cycles are indicated, this blue line is the halving point, right? What happened previously in Bitcoin cycles was the fact that up until the halving, we would have these little step ups. And then usually about the second step up is where we'd have the halving, and then prices would go parabolic. What if we're seeing something completely different in this next cycle? What if we're seeing, instead of these little leg ups, prices are going to go parabolic before the halving even starts? Which is a very big possibility and something to consider, especially because of the fact this is now a big player's game with Bitcoin. Up to this point in history, you just had the average retail investor, the average guy just looking to kind of trade around and mess around with Bitcoin. That's who was accumulating Bitcoin in this time. You had some billionaires, but for the most part, it was just the average retail investor messing with Bitcoin in this time. And now that there's enough liquidity for the big players to get in, which we saw, are they going to mess around accumulating, or are they just going to start buying in troves? Because they know what's going to happen once the halving starts. They already know. They've seen it before. And so now we've got a player's game where you now have billion-dollar corporations, you have banks, you have the rich in general, now stepping into this. And I think that that's really what we're going to see in this next cycle, is something very large and much bigger than anything that we'd been expecting up to this point. I think that we could see a 3-wave that breaks all-time highs, comes down to retest, and then the 5-wave could take us, we could see $50,000 Bitcoin before we've even finished the 1-wave. And so this next cycle, guys, is something that is going to be very, very much, this next cycle is going to be something much larger than we've seen up to this point. And so I really wanted to just talk about this, is the fact that I don't think this cycle is going to behave similarly to how we've previously been expecting. I think that this is going to be much different. It's going to be much more parabolic in nature. Now, based off of an analysis perspective, if this current cycle follows this last cycle, we're going to see about a $300,000 to $400,000 Bitcoin. And that's just crazy. What if it goes even higher than that? Now, I know from my technical analysis perspective, it doesn't look like that's necessarily as likely following the log chart. It doesn't necessarily seem like it's going to go up that high, but it very easily can. This could be a cycle that breaks much higher than anything we've been expecting, because there's much bigger players entering this game and have been entering this game. So with all of that being said, I want to go over one final thing before I wrap up this video, and that is Google search trends. Now, if you go and Google Bitcoin, it'll show you how hyped this search trend has been. Now, at our peak highs, we were at 100. That's the highest search trend that you can have as far as Google search trends go. But I want to note something here, guys. We're currently at a 9. And Bitcoin is already past that 6K mark. So this just shows that the average retail investor, the average person in society, is still not waking up to Bitcoin. Bitcoin is still just a pretty low searched trend at this point. What happens when we break all-time highs? Or what happens when we hit 10,000? Because my guess is once we hit about 10,000, that's when you're going to start to see the mainstream news really start to pick up on Bitcoin a lot more. And then that's when the average retail investor starts to hear about it. That's when they want to start getting invested into it. So this is all just something to consider, guys. The fact that this search trend is still so low, yet Bitcoin is currently just under $8,000 per Bitcoin. What happens when it starts to go up? What is that going to do to price? There's so many factors to think about with this next cycle because it's so different than anything we've seen. We haven't seen real players entering the market up to this point. We don't know how that's going to develop in price terms. There's so many of these factors that we have to consider here. And so this is really the point for making this video today. I wanted to go over and talk about kind of my thoughts with how parabolic Bitcoin could get in this next cycle. Now, with all of that being said, I think that the best thing to do in this time is just make sure that you're not getting shaken out. Make sure that you're thinking in terms of the long-term perspective. Even though that there's lots of profits to be made in the short term with Bitcoin going up and down, don't get shaken out on the retraces. Just remember that 3 years from now, this $8,000 Bitcoin is going to look so insignificant. And kind of what happened with the last cycle. I mean, if we pull up a weekly time frame and go from here, look at what happened in the last cycle. Look how dwarfed that is. Just a little blip on the big term perspective of things. What do you think is going to happen with this one? It's going to be the same thing. It's going to look like a little tiny blip in the cycle of things as Bitcoin goes who knows how high. 100, 200, 300, $400,000, maybe even $1 million. I don't know, but we're going to find out. So anyways, guys, this is the video I had for you. Just wanted to give you guys my thoughts and perspective with how things are playing out thus far. It's much different than anything we've seen. I do expect this cycle to behave significantly different. More parabolic, more money flooding into this. With bigger players entering this market, it's a big man's game. It's a grown man's game. So don't get shaken out with the little swings in between. Remember to keep that long-term perspective with things moving forward because you don't know what's going to happen. Nobody does. So don't get shaken out. Stick to your strategy and just hold through. Keep some of what locked away for the long term that you don't touch. And just remember, guys, this is going to be a very, very crazy time as far as Bitcoin goes. And those players that are able to keep strong hands and just hold through all of the emotion are going to be the ones that profit off of this significantly greater than anybody else. So thank you all so much for watching this video. I will catch you in the next one. Peace out.